his birth, a place he hadn't seen since he was 9 years old. But here he'd been shunned for his Irish accent and Christian ways, until Osa gave him a chance. And now that chance, like everything else in Bert's life, was lost. He was a misfit here, as he was everywhere. If only he'd been killed in battle. All he'd ever wanted was to give his life for Ragnhild. The shield maiden had captured his heart the moment he laid eyes on her. He wasn't sure why. She was no Christian, and certainly no lady. There was a wildness about her that spoke to his soul. But he did not speak to hers. That she'd made abundantly clear. After he'd nearly died saving her life, she'd been duty-bound to care for him, but his weakness made her disdain him all the more. She hid it well, but he could read the distaste in her eyes. Over the winter he'd tried to tell her of the joys of Christ, but she only rolled her eyes and shoved a spoonful of porridge in his mouth. Like everyone else here, heathens all, when he shared the good news of Christ with them, their eyes glazed over like good-natured corpses. Eventually he gave up, though he felt a secret guilt at his failure. Perhaps his faith had lost its fire. Here in a pagan land, he'd not confessed to a priest for over a year, since he'd come to this God-forsaken country, nor heard Mass or taken communion. He tried as best he could to keep the faith alive, yet he feared he was sinking into the swampland of error, day by treacherous day. Ulf looked up as Bert entered the smithy. The droop of the man's shoulders told Ulf everything he needed to know.
"It takes a while to get your strength back,"
he said.
"It's been more than half a year."
Ulf stiffened at Bert's morose tone.
"You were nearly killed." "I wish I had been,"
Bert muttered. Ulf sighed. If Bert had died in battle last fall, weapon in hand, he'd be in Valhall now, fighting and feasting, waiting for Ragnarok. Or would he? Ulf smiled at the image of the Christian warrior, waking from death to find himself on the mead benches of Odin's corpse hall, drinking with the pagans who'd sent him there.
"What becomes of Christian warriors when you're killed in battle?"
"We go to heaven, if we deserve it." Bert's tone was clipped. Ulf grunted. Heaven. From what he'd heard, it was a gutless kind of place with lots of singing. He doubted they had decent mead or ale. Better the Christian had lived. Bert picked up a knife and began to carve a sword grip. His skills in the smithy were useful but limited. The man couldn't swing a hammer yet, though he tried every day. Ulf wondered if Bert would ever fully regain the strength to go into battle again. If he didn't, what would become of him? He wouldn't be able to row either. There was not much use on Tromøy for a cripple. Ulf was grateful that his own injuries allowed him to function. His legs had been permanently maimed, preventing him from marching any distance or running. But with his massive upper body strength, Ulf could still hold his own in a shield wall and pull an oar with the best of them. Conversely, Bert had been wounded in the back and the stomach, damaging muscles needed to wield a sword or row a ship. And being a Christian, he couldn't very well become a skald or a sorcerer. Those were about the only occupations open to a layman in the Norse world. Ulf hoped Bert would regain his strength with time. Ragnhild entered the dim hall, lit only by shafts of daylight from the smoke hole and gable ends and the sullen embers of the long fire. The cavernous room was empty at this time of day, when everyone was out of doors making the most of the early summer weather. She sat down on the bench and took up her sword, lady's servant. She pulled a whetstone from the pouch that hung from her belt, and ran the stone across the blade. It was a pointless exercise, for Ulf had forged lady's servant from Woot's steel, a metal that held an edge like no other. Still, the long, smooth strokes soothed Ragnhild into a mindless trance. The creak of the outer door jolted her from the reverie. Midday light invaded the hall as Einar burst in. The warrior was out of breath from running.
"It's your brother,"
he wheezed. Ragnhild put the whetstone aside and rose, gripping her sword. "Which one?"